Now we continue the shir on kiddush hachodesh. So we have here this diagram. There is 30 degrees the merchik of the yareach from the shemesh. That's shemesh EQ. And remember, this is not the actual rod. This is just a line of sight. The rods are omitted in this page. The rod is really goes down here somewhere and then goes up from Q to this point here. Let's call it X. But right now we just are focusing on the angle that's created by shemesh, earth, Q. Q is the Irechem Tzoy. Then we said that there's in space a rod that continues from XE to Z, and from that point Z there is like a wind blowing and pushing a certain rod that sticks out, that it's a continuation from this one. We push it till B. That's the called the tesefes hamasl. Okay, now this is a nice picture. Here we see Eretz. This is the one rod, small, big one, and we see how this gets pushed. So the tesefes hamasl is not this full angle. It's important to understand. It's only the angle that's from the extension of the earth. You see, we had in this picture from earth extending all the way. So whatever that imaginary extension gets pushed, see this point QA gets pushed a little bit, this tiny angle, that's what the tesefes hamasl is. Because that's how much it changes from the supposedly position. That's 30 degrees, right? Because this thing here would be 30 degrees. So it's changed. This rod that was supposed to be continued from Earth, the line of sight from Earth to QA, gets pushed to B. This angle is the one that's called the tesefes hamasl. Please understand, it's not, because this rod, even though it comes out from this rod, but that's not negeya. It's negeya is the angle that gets changed. Instead of continuing from Earth to QA, we push this stick a little bit, and that's the tesefes hamasl. I call it makla hamatiz. It pushes it. It's a wind that blows from Z, Q, and it pushes the stick all the way till, instead of seeing the moon at A, we see it at B, or the tip of that, you want to call it the tip of that stick that's continuing from EQA. Instead of seeing it by A, we see it at B. Okay, it's confusing. Please listen to it a few times to see what's happening here. Okay, this here is again showing different, it shows some interesting thing. This is a little bit mathematics, that if, again here we have CAB, A is it says Aretz, it's Aleph, B and this is C. These two are the same far in space. B Aretz is the same as Aretz C, and the Aretz B there's connected this rod that we don't want to show now, but we do show, however, the merchik hakaful. We show that it's 30 degrees from Aretz to this point, and also 30 degrees from the angle shemesh. Aretz B is also 30. This is merchik hakaful. Whatever the Yerechem Tzoy is misrachik from the shemesh, double of that is the arc of AB misrachik from Oretz Yerech. And this determines this angle. 30 here means 30 here. And this determines this angle, and this determines this angle. That's why the Rambam uses Merchek HaKafel, because geometrically speaking, mathematically speaking, it all depends on this angle. Merchek HaKafel really is not the point. The point is that's 30 degrees. So that means this is 30 and this is 120. And then we solve the triangle, since we know this length of Oretz Yerech, we know this angle, and we know this side. We could calculate this angle, and then we know this angle. So, mathematically speaking, this determines this angle, this tiny angle here. That's why Rambam uses Merchek HaKafel, because this is the one, this angle, 30 degrees, is used for a certain formula to figure out what the angle, this tiny angle is, to Sefes HaMasl. Now, we'll get to hopefully to the punchline of this whole thing, hopefully by this year. Let's see if I can get one more picture. Okay, I think this I showed already. Yes, the Sefes HaMasl. We showed that same thing like before. We have here the earth, P. This is where it turns. This is there's a rod connected, but the movement of the Sefes HaMasl is this angle, M, Q, F. Because this is the extension of Earth. Earth, QF is extension. And this, the Z, Riach Nesheves Mezi, the Q, amazes as QM. And it pushes it, Hayotzis Yasher Me PQ. Yeah, it extends PQ, and it turns it all the way to here, that's ZQM. So the angle that gets changed from, instead of going straight from Earth, QF, we have here the FQ. Instead of FQ straight, there's MQ. That's this angle, MQF. This is 2.46 days after the Moiled. Yereach Emtza Shloishim Mailis Mishemesh Emtza. It's 30 degrees from the Shemesh. Sorry, Shemesh is here. This is exactly 30 degrees. I measured it. And here is also 30 degrees. So Shemesh EP is 30 and Shemesh EQ is also 30. Now, this is important. Shemesh PQ lo ichpas lan. Shemesh. This doesn't matter. Shemesh PQ. Doesn't matter. This angle, this line here. Why? Because this is not what we're interested in. We're interested to know the angle that the Earth, Sun, Earth, Q. That's 30 degrees. Merchek HaKafel is QEP. QEP. This is double. So this is 30. This is 30. 60 degrees. This angle FQM is called the Sefes HaMasl. Okay. Oh, this is. Oh, okay. Here comes the final punchline. Hopefully, this will finish this year. Now, up to now, we only discussed this QM, and we explained that this gets a small movement because of the wind that blows. We imagined. And whatever it was that we called the Sefes HaMasl, that's a tiny angle. But we totally did not discuss yet something that some people discuss first, but I wish to discuss it last. This is the simple thing that there's another rod, that is QQMM. It's attached to this one. Imagine you have two popsicles, and you put in one popsicle with a with a hinge, and then there's another one. So when you turn the small one, the big one turns, but the big one can turn independently from the small one. It can turn independently. The small one turns, and then the big one turns. Let's say the small one turns a few degrees, and the big one turns, let's say the small one turns 2 degrees. The big one turns 10 degrees. So totally, it's 12 degrees. There's two of the movements. This one can move, and this one also has a hinge where it can move. So this is what some people, before they start anything, they talk about this, but I wish to talk about it last. Enter Maslow available code Yom 13.3.54. This rod, this big one, MMQQ, that's attached to the small one, goes 13 degrees and 3 halakim. Remember, this is not this point. Don't get confused. That goes 13 degrees and 13 halakim. That's totally something else. That's how much that point goes around, moves away from the sun. That we're not going to discuss now. We discussed that already a few shurim ago. Now we are zooming in. We're zooming in on this tiny area where the tip, let's go so you can see. You see? Shemesh EQ. We have already this tip here that went away from the sun each day 12 degrees. We're not even going to show now the rods. We're just imagining, we're just zooming in on this tip. So this tip, Huzas Ktsas, QM got moved as we showed from the previous picture. It got moved, let's say 2 degrees because of that wind that was blowing. But let's not forget that QQMM gets moved 13 degrees. So that's why some people talk about this first, because this is such a huge movement. But I want to discuss the hard things first and the easy things last. So this MMQQ goes clockwise every single day 13 degrees and 3 halakim. Keeps on moving. And besides that, the QM is like a tiny oscillating movement, back and forth for very few degrees because of that diagram that we explained before. You have a wind blowing and pushing it this way and that way. So the final position of this whole rod, we must know these two things, Tesefes HaMaslo and Emtza HaMaslo. That's how much this big rod turned independently, and how much he turned because of the movement of QM. And that's the Rambam is going to give us. Once we know both of them, we know where this clock, where this handle is up to. This whole big handle, let's now make it into one handle. Let's say we know this moved 2 degrees and this moved 10. So it's altogether 12 degrees away from the starting point. Let's call it 12 o'clock point, that's a clock. And then the final thing would be to take, let's see if we have a picture here from the final step. We'll not do it in this year because it's already almost 15 minutes. Okay, here we go. So final thing would be, we have here this point Y. This rod CY is the total angle that was moved. The rod was moved because we combine here both movements, the movement of the small and of the big. So now the final position is here, CY. Now, this is called Maslow Hamiti. Now, we say, let's see, somebody stands on the earth and he wants to see the position of the moon here. Here's the real place of the moon. No more monkey business. So the angle is, this angle changes the position. Instead of the moon being by C, that would be the mean moon, as we said before, 30 degrees. Now we get this Yerei Hamiti, and it's this angle. And this angle is determined by this angle, and that must be explained in the next tape to show how this angle here determines this tiny angle. And finally we know the Makom Yerei Hamiti. Now please listen to this many times if you need. I'm going to stop here, but Don't go further unless you really understand what's going on here. Thank you very much.